evening, everyone. Pleased to sort of meet everyone. I thought rather than do death by PowerPoint, I'll not have any slides and talk about my career journey and maybe talk about how that applies to BCS and some of the things we're looking at, and then leave time to sort of answer any questions you may have on anything really. So I began my career quite a long time ago. 40 years ago this year, I started training as the chartered accountant, which is a sort of 3-year training course with some really difficult exams at the end of it. I qualified and decided that life as an auditor probably wasn't for me. I think it's incredible training. But I decided at that point I wanted to go and work in business. So I went actually just across the road from here and went to work for Waits the Builders. Now, Waits the Builders had a publicly floated arm called Waits City, and they owned a number of properties around the city. So they owned those properties and rented them out, but they also were then developing at the time of lots of building going on in the city, where they were literally knocking down buildings, lots of small buildings on a site, putting that together and building big super towers for offices. Interestingly, that coincided, that was the beginning of the 90s, with a big downturn in property. So what I had gone in to do initially, I was looking at sort of joint venture companies with Japanese investors. Soon very much dried up. Lots of staff left, and I'm not a person who's very good at sitting around doing my thumbs, so I decided to put the cost base of the company, started renegotiating the contracts. We had lots of buildings with where we were storing stuff, so I sold off all the things we were storing, because that then put us into empty rates territory, which was a lot cheaper than paying full rates. And this was at the time of the IRA bombings in the city as well. So I remember, we lost a building, literally a couple of doors away that way. So it was a really interesting time. But because it was a property downturn, I ended up learning lots of different skills, learned how to negotiate contracts, so things that wouldn't have been in my normal job. After 3 and a bit years of doing that, I went to work for Sainsbury's, and again in property. So I went in, and this was boom time in supermarkets for Sainsbury's particularly. It was always a competition, I laugh about this now, between Sainsbury's and M&S, who was going to be the biggest retailer in the UK. And at that time, Sainsbury's were doing really well. I went in to the property team as an accountant, but looking at their big new store building programme. And at the time, Tesco's were quite a bit smaller than Sainsbury's. But they had a big land bank that they had built up. They had been buying up sites around the country and then sitting on that. And then I think the government changes in legislation came in, and you couldn't, out of town supermarkets, that you weren't able to buy up land so much, and Tesco then kept on building. And I always remember the day Tesco's became bigger than Sainsbury's, which was a real shock in that organisation. I moved out of property, and probably one of the best jobs I ever did, I went to work for the bakery, restaurant and petrol business, which were a sideline for Sainsbury's actually. They weren't the core supermarket, buy it in, put it on the shelves, sell it. So bakery was sort of manufacturing bread and selling it. Restaurants with the new trend of opening coffee shops and restaurants within the stores. And petrol, really growing business of all the supermarkets at the time were opening petrol stations and car washes, which is a lovely, almost 90% margin to it, makes you loads of money. And actually, I was the accountant that looked after those three businesses, sat on the board of those, which is incredible when I look back on it now, because I think I was probably 30 years old. So I sat on the boards of those businesses, which were huge businesses in their own right. I mean, I think petrol was turning over. I think I was about 3 billion of turnover between those businesses. So I learned loads. I absolutely loved that job because it was very fast paced. You could make a decision one day and you could see the impact of that decision. So I think when I went in, the restaurant business was losing money. And I remember looking at the accounts and saying to them, the more you sell, the more money you're going to lose. Your pricing's wrong. Because they had made the assumption that running a restaurant, the guy who knew what he was doing, restaurant labour in the marketplace was really, I'm going to make you laugh now, it was like £2.50 an hour. Supermarket labour, which you had to pay the same, was £4 an hour, something like that. So of course, the margin that you would normally have on food didn't work when you put that within a supermarket. So upping the prices actually transformed that from a 10 million loss to a 3 million profit almost overnight. After doing that job, I did many other roles there. So I was lucky enough, I used to get a tap on the shoulder to say, we'd like you to come to this team. So I became at one point my worst ever job. So a real good learning point was being group management accountant. That was a real accountant job of just here's a load of spreadsheets and here's what the numbers look like. Really high profile, but I hated that. I mean, it just wasn't me. So I only did that for 6 months. And then I went back into the trading area after pricing, promotions. And I think, do you remember when supermarkets first started getting clothing in? And there was a big price war going on with people like Procter & Gamble, Levi's. So supermarkets were buying Levi jeans internationally, shipping them in at a much lower price to be able to sell them here. It was a really interesting time where supermarkets were innovating, diversifying their portfolios. So I did that role, and then I think I ended up working I managed the margin at one point, which was £3 billion, and then ended up working in like an internal consultancy, so sorting out things that go wrong and investigating that. So I did about 8 years there, 7.5, 8 years, something like that. And then obviously Sainsbury's were hitting a massive downturn. Tesco's became much bigger than them. There was literally a change in leadership almost every 6 months. It was like the deck chairs on the Titanic, you had to sort of move that round. And when they were asking me can you go back and manage the margin again? Can you go back and do this? I thought, it's time to get out. I've done those roles. I'm not growing anymore. I had some interesting interviews at the time, but I think once you're in an industry, you tend to get quite pigeonholed. So I was a retailer at that point. So agencies would send me off to lots of other interviews. And I wanted to do something different. And then I almost strangely I got asked to go for an interview for a really technical role, which isn't me at all. At the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and it was almost, if you don't go for this interview, we're going to stop sending you to places. We need someone to go for this interview. 10 minutes into my interview, they said, it's not the role for you. And I went, yeah, it's been lovely to meet you, but you're absolutely right, it's not the role for me. I was quite happy with that. And I went, no, we want you to come and work here. We want your skills. We want your commercial skills. Can we come back to you? And I thought, that was just a nice goodbye. But 6 months later, they came back to me with a role. Maybe it was 3 months later, but they had written a role to get me to go there. So, head of product development, we want you to create products for a professional body. And that's how I ended up at ICAW. So I kind of started at the bottom I started as head of the department, which was me. I spent a lot of time traveling the world internationally. I think I've been there 2 weeks and they put me on a plane to the States. I helped set up an international consortium of 25 institutes around the globe to look at an assurance product. It was a tech product, which is quite funny when I remember that now. So it was something called Web Trust. So this was when websites were being developed. But if you had a big brand, if you're Marks and Spencer's, people would probably transact with you online. But if you were Joe Blogs down the road, nobody would know you. So who would buy your product or give you money? Because how could they be sure they were transacting safely? So that was my first ever project I did at the ICAW. And actually it took me they said, you've got 6 months to have a look at this. It took me about 2 weeks to say, this isn't going to work. Because anybody with a brand will trade off their brand and people will trust their brand. Other people, smaller businesses that need this can't afford it, because it was literally, you would go in and assure and test their website every single quarter. It was a great way for accountants to make money. And I just thought that's never going to fly in the market. And I was right. But off the back of that, having a consortium of 25 institutes around the world who could work together and we weren't competing with each other was a really interesting forum. So we set up something called the International Innovation Network, which lasted for about 15 years. Actually, it was a really useful forum to discuss ideas, discuss new products. If something works in the US or Canada, will it work in the UK? More than likely, yes. We did try and transact with each other, but transacting contracts across international boundaries is quite challenging. It's easier to take the idea, copy it and start again than trying to do that sometimes. But I worked my way up in the organisation, so I became the members director. And then we had sold off our publishing businesses about 20 years ago when I first came into on a 10-year licence. It was a really good deal. We got £46 million for the business, which definitely filled our pension hole at the time. And in 10 years' time, we were able to restart our commercial businesses. I had started much earlier than that because the publishing business didn't envisage online at the time. Shows how long ago it was. It was a very straightforward paper business, and the contract didn't preclude us from, doing some online newsletters, which I had been running for a number of years. So I then set up the commercial division of the Institute and grew that over 10 years to a 20 million turnover business, making £10 million worth of profit. Before, the ICAW is a big institute, but we were doing very well. And then after a couple of years, I got the membership bit back because that wasn't doing so well. So I ran both of them. And then COVID hit, which was a really interesting time for all professional bodies. Lots of professional bodies have never really recovered from COVID because the financial hit was huge. Because most institutes aren't just reliant on membership fees, they're reliant on commercial businesses which weren't running at the time. Hybrid working came in, which is another interesting thing that everyone has had to deal with. And immediately after COVID and sort of back to the office, I became the chief operating officer there. So I did that role for 3.5 years. I joined BCS officially last July, but unofficially I came in as a consultant exactly a year ago, so last February, to look at some of our commercial businesses before I became the CEO. So they're interesting organisations, professional bodies. They're traditionally quite slow moving. They've gone through interesting evolution in terms of being very traditional, paper-based, turn up for a physical event. Here's your hard copy magazine. So it's quite interesting for me to come to BCS and find out we still have lots of those things. But we haven't moved completely online. I thought BCS would be so high tech. So it's probably a little bit behind the curve of where it should be. And lots of institutes are really struggling at the moment. Lots of them are subscale in size. BCS are quite lucky that they're a decent size. They're not one of the giants, but they're a decent size in the membership space. But lots of people, like everyone else, we have quite a lot of half-empty office space with hybrid working. So quite high overheads. And relevance to younger people. We have a generation, very easy for somebody like me at my age, you join a profession, do your exams, you use your post-nominals. Younger people feel very different about those things. They maybe don't hold that in the same esteem. And I think we have to work much harder to attract younger people than we have in the past. And we maybe need to do things differently. So for me, I think couldn't be more excited to come into the tech profession at this particular time. I've literally just come from a meeting with some government departments talking about AI assurance and what that should look like in the profession. I'm used to, if you're an accountant, you have to be a member of a professional body, pretty much. And it's not like that in tech. That's quite a shock to me. And yet, tech people can take an organisation down in minutes, probably. As an accountant, it might take a little bit longer than that. And I think it's really, being a professional, being a member of a professional body is really, really important. I mean, ironically, the one department I probably couldn't run in an organisation is the finance team, because I haven't run a finance team in years. I'm pretty good with numbers and I can read a balance sheet and a P&L. I have run a digital department for 15 years and I have run the IT department before for a year. But I've also sat on the board for 12 years and I probably was one of the most qualified in understanding tech discussions, and yet we were investing millions of pounds in tech. We've all had a tech project that hasn't gone that well. And I think that knowledge of tech around the board isn't good enough. I think I would honestly say I think most companies need tech as a seat on the board now. I mean, it's that crucial to what is going on in most organisations. It's really hard to imagine that tech doesn't have a seat on that boardroom table. I think there's lots of, the tech industry in the UK, depends which report you read, but could be 2 million people, which means we haven't penetrated that audience particularly well. Around 70,000, that's huge potential. I need to understand why people don't naturally want to become a member. I think we have done some work on our membership offering. So that's looking better than it was, and it will keep improving. So we now have some free CPD modules. We have ethics training on there that's free for members. There will be more things coming. But I think it's really important that we update our membership offering that actually attract more people to become a member. We've been looking at our apprenticeship business, and we will now be offering our IT tech to anyone taking a tech apprenticeship, as long as they qualify and obviously pass it. I need to look at the university market. We have 100,000 people in the UK on accredited degrees, but they've probably never heard of BCS. So how do we capture that next generation? How do we make it attractive for them? How do we get them to want to join us is a really important challenge for me. And also the pathways. How do you go from being a member to being chartered? How do you go from chartered to being fellow or IT tech to member? We need to be much clearer about those links and career paths that people can take. So we've got lots of work going on to look at how we can do that. But there's a lot to do, but I think enormous opportunities in the market. But it will mean we need to change. Could we become, I want us to become the home of AI. Where else is that going to go? The government are looking at AI, they're looking at AI assurance, but I can't believe that's just going to be a completely unregulated new area of tech. Something has to change. How do we stop another post office issue happening? Being a professional body and being a member of the professional body is not going to mean that would never happen again. However, there has to be consequences of those decisions. People have to be asking the right questions. I mean, to be honest, that's probably as much a failure of corporate governance in the post office as it was of Fujitsu in the tech. But, people need to be held responsible for that. So there has to be, but if you're not signed up to a standard or to behave ethically, then it is a bit like the Wild West at the moment. So for me, I think BCS needs some rapid change. There is a lot to do, but it's also a really exciting time. I talk a lot when I give speeches about professionalism in career, and I don't think that's just because of my background. You wouldn't invite an electrician into your home to rewire your house if they weren't qualified. I find it, but I think you can really see the parallels with the tech industry there, and yet we don't have that professional register. So I think some of these things are really important. I think the other thing I'm talking about quite a lot is tech in the boardroom. So I've mentioned, I think not only should tech be better represented in boardrooms, but I think boards should be trained in tech. What questions should they be asking? I think that is, from my experience on a board, I think that is sadly missing, that understanding in tech. I think particularly with AI coming, well, AI and cyber, two huge challenges for and opportunities in, well, AI, not cyber's an opportunity, but really boards are discussing those things. Do they really understand them? Because if you can't control something you don't understand. So I think boardroom training to non-tech people is going to become really important. And the other one for me is the impact of tech on all professions. Particularly AI, wherever we go with this, how do we help support other professions embrace tech in a different way and do that safely? And I think we have a role to play in that as well. So I think for me, that was my so I have done a lot of transformation over my career in different roles I've had. And I'd like to think that that's why they've given me the role here. But I think, BCS has a lot of change to go through as well. This is quite a challenging time. And I think we need to embrace that change. And I think that change, that's exciting. So I'm going to throw it open to everyone in the room. Because maybe that isn't what you want to hear about. Maybe you want to ask me more questions about what I've talked about. But also, I'd quite like to hear your thoughts on BCS and change.
My thoughts initially are that, yes, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying pretty much. And there are some, I mean, just the sheer numbers mean there's terrific opportunities. And also, we're talking, when we look at things like AI, we really are, it really is a global phenomenon, not a British phenomenon. Yeah. So, and the scale of it becomes hyperbolic if you stop to think about it. So I agree with you. I think all of the areas that you've highlighted, the board, transformation, impact on professions, becoming some sort of home for AI, having some sort of significant national or international role in AI, are all things that I would echo and support, and I'm happy to help you.
We have a question from an online attendee. A challenge for boards inviting CIOs, etc., to join them is arguably that many have had not diversified their skills outside of what was needed to get on within an IT department. And in my experience, many CIOs simply lack wider business acumen outside of technology areas.
Yeah.
So there may be a glass ceiling.
I would completely agree with that comment. And interesting enough, I'm going back a few years. I would have said something quite similar about accountants. So we had an incredible membership at ICAW. So 83% or 73% of the FTSE 100 had one of our members on the board. Not necessarily as the accountant, could have been the chairman, could have been the CEO, but we were very well represented. And I did some interviews with some of those people to say, how did you get to where you've got to in your career? And without exception, it was not their technical skills that got them there. It was leadership skills. And what was interesting about that, they then offered to help me develop the next generation, and I set up a leadership development business, which is still running to this day and doing very well. And what's interesting for me coming into the tech profession, obviously I had my own people in the old organisation that I worked with in tech, and I would say they weren't great leaders. They were technically very good, but didn't like leading, didn't like necessarily having difficult conversations. And I have people, BCS probably similar to that. So one of the things I have been looking at with Cambridge University, they have some interesting leadership development courses, which we will be launching shortly with them. Because those leadership skills are so important to anyone who's career aspirations to lead a team, CIO, eventually become a board. It is about your leadership skills. It is never going to be about your technical ability. And I think that they are attributes that we need to support development in the tech profession. So I completely agree with that question. And as I said, I am not the world's most technical accountant. I moved away from that quite early in my career, actually. The reason I've been able to develop my career is because of the leadership skills I had, and that is where I pushed my career. I could not run an accounting team, and I'm years out of date probably technically. So I think there are different skills that we need to bring in and support in the industry. Oh, three at once.
Regarding the young professionals or the young people, I've seen in the past technical events like Raspberry Pi hackathon. It attracts a lot of them.
Yep.
I've seen so many groups doing it, including BCS women. Can we do something like that in the future? Not specifically for these two groups, but in general.
No, I would completely agree with that. To attract young people and to engage them, we need, it's not here's a membership offering, do the same as everyone else. That is just not going to work. It has to be something completely different. So give me a bit of time, but I would agree with that. We have got to pick the right events. And also I think a younger members offer needs to be a little bit different as well. It's about how they develop their career, what support we can give to that. It needs to be different.
I have a few questions. I think I have 7, but I will pick only one. You mentioned you comment from the Chartered Institute of Accountants, and you are coming here and you spent some first time in your career developing commercial offerings. We do not have the register to be doing any kind of IT. You don't need to be a member of the Chartered Institute. And I think that is good if you want to do a startup or launch an app. But when your IT system is a critical system, either for government or I think possibly in the UK, we should ask to have some kind of responsibility and potentially through the Chartered Institute.
Yeah, completely agree. Watch the space.
Yeah.
That's what I can say on that one.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
And in connections.
We do, to be fair, have some registers.
Yeah.
They're kind of hidden behind the login, which is kind of pointless. It needs to be in front of the login. But I am talking to the right people about this at this point. I can't say any more than that, but I'm absolutely working on that. I think it's really important.
And regarding the commercial offerings, what can you tell us that, at this point?
Well, as a start point, we have put some free CPD in there. We have put ethics modules in there for members. That was my kind of start point. Today is the day of the relaunch of the individual membership offering. So hopefully, I haven't gone in and looked at it yet. Go online and have a look. But I'm trying to put more value into that offering. We have, I'm not sure if it's in there yet, but if not, it's coming. We have done a deal with the Non-Exec Directors Association.
Oh, nice.
I think that has gone public for members to get board training. And we are currently developing a course with them, which is not for our members, but what boards need to know about tech, which we've already had some interest in. We have got, as I mentioned earlier, some courses, some more soft skills courses coming on with Cambridge University. And so my view is that everything doesn't have to be invented by BCS and developed internally. We can work with all sorts of different people to bring the best that's out there together to promote to members. So you've got maybe one place to look for it rather than trying to go to find it yourself, as long as we've done that due diligence on that. But yeah, there's more coming.
Thank you. Fantastic. I still have one more question. So I'm happy to keep asking, but
I think somebody else had their hand up.
Well, I was just going to say that you mentioned the accounting profession several times, and I have to full disclosure, I'm a lapsed accountant myself.
Oh, there you go.
An early misspent youth as an accountant before falling in love with computers. But it's interesting that if you look at, I'm from fairly recently from KPMG. If you look at the latest stuff that's coming out from the big 4 accounting firms, AI and IT is their big growth area, and it's driving growth at a rate they've never seen before.
Yes.
So
I would say that profitability at a rate.
Sorry?
It will be driving profitability at a rate they've never seen before as well. I think accounting is one of those professions that's going to be quite heavily hit by AI.
So there might be a kind of bridge which you might be particularly skilled at between the consultancy specialist group, which has always kind of has always had aspirations to do more with the Big Four, but maybe the time is coming where the Big Four need us more than they have in the past.
Yes, I would agree with that. I was with some of them this afternoon. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And if you look at, again, I talk a lot about the Institute of Chartered Accountants. One of the things actually I did there before I left, I was on the board of an AI startup project, which we had invested in, which was looking at the audit market and looking at, it was an ingestion engine. So I can say that here because you might understand what I'm talking about, but I can only probably describe it in lay terms, but it was an ingestion engine that could take structured and non-structured data and then compare. So you could take big retailer, 1,000 shops, leases, it could take all of that data, read all the leases and show you a schedule of what that looks like, which would have taken days to do as an audit. They were developing that as a concept. You can imagine that sort of ate cash up pretty quickly. But the company was sold 18 months ago for an awful lot of money. That wasn't why we're investing in it. We were hoping to keep the IP for the accounting market. However, ChatGPT comes along, other AI models got much more sophisticated. So I think it was absolutely the right time to sell that, because I think it needed enormous investment, which it got by selling it. So, but I think there are lots of parallels between accountancy and tech, and the major consultancies and players that all spun out of the accounting market are huge in tech. You're absolutely right.
I was amused to hear from KPMG that they had asked the auditors for KPMG to review their fees this year because AI should be making it cheaper. And I thought that's an incredibly circuitous logic.
Well, I also read that in the press and had to chuckle to myself.
Yes, it was amusing.
Because they had the fees cut down and you think, anyone who's a client of theirs
exactly
are going to be challenging you in the same vein. So, but also it's the reason you're seeing a whole load of private equity pour into the accounting profession, because it's about to become an awful lot more profitable because of AI. And there's literally billions of pounds being poured in and accountancy firms being bought up all over the place off the back of AI.
Yep.
To go back to your question.
I take a note also.
There are a couple of questions online. One of them is, I am looking forward to the journey. How will be the BCS support the volunteers to enable the changes our members need?
We are looking at the volunteering base at the moment, and there is a paper going to the board in March, because I think one of the things that struck me when I came in, I could see volunteers complaining, lots of noise going on, 700 queries a month coming into the help desk. And we've had a look at it, but we have 127 either regional or user groups at this point, which I had a little bit of a meltdown at. They're not all active, but most of them are in some respects. That is a lot for us to manage. I'm not sure we're spending enough on this. I need to make some money elsewhere to be able to spend some more on this. But I think we're not able to listen to that much noise and get your input enough because it's too diversified. So we are asking the board to have a look at some proposals we've put forward on this. membership is incredibly important, and the communities and member groups are really, really important to me, and to BCS. So, but we need to hear your voice. We need to be able to come out to you more and say, what do you think about this? Can we have, we're getting some really good traction with the government now, with different groups, asking your opinion on stuff and feeding that back in. We need to be doing more of that. You need to be influencing more. At the moment, that's quite hard for us to do, to try and manage 127 different groups. So I think we need a better way of managing those groups and consolidating them in a different way, not getting rid of them. But I think there's also groups that we don't have. I think we're underrepresented in the gaming industry. That's a huge area of tech. There are other areas of tech we've got no representation. Why don't we have 5100 CIO group? They would be very influential, that people would want to listen to. So I think there's things missing, and I think it's grown up over 20 or 30 years organically, but probably needs, maybe now's the time to sort of look at, can we do it better? But that's not a negative. I'm going to point that out. I'm sure it won't make everyone happy, but yeah, I don't think we're doing it well. So it is an area of focus at this point. But I don't mean the groups aren't doing well. We're not listening enough, or we're finding it hard to listen because it's too diversified.
I like the 2 points, the 2 examples that you have put. We have a IT leaders group. We don't have a FTSE 100 group. I don't know what will take to move the group that we have into the other one, but I feel that perhaps we have been growing the way that we have grown, and now we can deliberately try to pursue other kind of or additional groups, like gaming also. I found interesting that it's a big thing. I wanted to make also a comment. I'm originally from Spain. I studied first in Spain, and then I did a master here. I have done an MBA recently. When I did my master in Cranfield in IT, I barely heard about the BCS. And it was not after 5 years possibly working that I started hearing about. We have in the UK a significant population coming from different areas of the world that may have no knowledge about BCS, not through universities and not through other areas. So any views of how we can increase that awareness?
I think at the moment, international is a little bit of a part, because I've got enough to focus on in the UK at this point. However, I think we need to develop some relationships with some other international bodies, and potentially we can map different qualifications. So when you move from one country to another, we could typically recognise that. That's the way I think longer term I would try and tackle that. But I do think it's important, and it's particularly important for tech, because it doesn't sit within boundaries. You're not restrained. You could work anywhere in the world. So I think it is a really important strategy. It's one I haven't formulated at this point, but it's something I think we need to look at other bodies that we would consider equivalent qualifications and map those through.
To be clear, I meant to bring up awareness, not internationally, but from our international labor. I don't know if anyone has any of the other questions.
They're more online. Where does the BCS look to position itself with the rise of accreditation from AWS, Azure, Google, etc., for IT and chartered management consulting for professional services?
I think we have to be realistic that there's a lot, I mean, there was a big consortium, big government announcement recently. There's lots of free courses out there online, lots of free courses linked to vendors. I think we always need to remain vendor agnostic because you need those transferable skills potentially. I don't think I know we can't compete with that. You know, we don't have billions of pounds, but I think it's a different part of the market. They're not professional qualifications necessarily. They're different. Maybe there's instances we can partner with people longer term. It's not an area I've looked at, but I know that's not the market we're competing in at this point.
Thank you.
I've heard a lot of what you've said, and it all sounds very good. What I haven't heard yet is why people would be incentivized to join the BCS and have some pathway through it. I think Antonio captured it nicely about the difference between a startup situation and possibly going to add this where in certain employment situations, if there are requirements to have certain professional qualifications or certifications, then there would be an obvious incentive. And there does not seem to be in the current age an incentive for the BCS.
I would agree with you that there isn't currently, but some of the things that we are talking about, potentially government or, you know, not in terms of, I think saying regulate the IT profession is a step too far. I can't see the government doing that, but they can certainly encourage the use of professional bodies. It's Chartered Week this week. It started today. That is the message coming from an awful lot of chartered bodies, including Chartered Management Institute. There has to be the demand for professionalisation, because otherwise, why would individuals do it? But I think it has to be driven by government and by companies, and maybe other professions that are regulated, as we're talking like the big accountancy firms, things like that. You know, their growth area is in tech, and they are, you know, all of the workforce, they'll all be doing CPD, they'll all be very professional. It seems odd that they mandate certain parts of the business to become members and not other parts. So I think it will be led by big business, not by smaller business.
How we can encourage them?
We are. We are. But for me, I think it has to be led by the government.
Yeah, because if we want to have in every FTSE 100 or 200, we want to have in every board one member.
Yeah.
Where to start? Well, probably we need the support from the government, but we probably will need that bigger companies start asking.
But I think it's really strange to have no regulation at all around the tech profession. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I'm not suggesting we become doctors or lawyers, where, you know, we were looking this morning, I've just been at a symposium today looking at the different levels of regulation in different professions. And, you know, I don't think we'll go to the highest level and, have a regulator sitting over us. And I don't think anyone's wanting that. But there has to be something more than we've got now.
My view is that we have systems that are critical, systems that they are not critical. For any system that is critical, I think we should have someone who is taking ownership, who is signing the documents, who is acting as someone in good faith.
Yeah.
for that, it's not only the knowledge that you have, the capabilities, but also is the integrity that you put, right? And I don't think that is a heavy regulation, but is for the very critical things, for what's happened with the post office, for what's happened with Heathrow, with the fires and the substation. Someone who is responsible.
And it was, somebody gave a really good example today. So if you were building an extension on your house, you wouldn't expect necessarily the person banging the nails in a piece of wood to be a member of a professional body and have a qualification, but you would expect the person who is looking at the beam you've put in to check that it's right, that the overall build quality is okay. So I think it's maybe not 100% for every single person, but you would expect some level of assurance there, overseeing the work and what's going on. I thought that was a great example somebody gave this afternoon of, you know, is that your CIO? Is it your IT director? What does that look like? Or is it certain roles in the profession that you would want covered in that way?
I think this question it goes in the line that is what is being said already. It has a different angle. What is the value proposition the BCS is offering members, including chartered fellows like myself, paying over £300 in fees per annum? While the status of being a professional body is nice to have, a real practical benefit would include the BCS kite marking, I don't know what's that, IT recruitment agencies to sort out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, as is to present it completely unregulated and not necessarily serving the profession as it could do?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I have had some discussions with recruitment agencies on that very point, because how do you know what good looks like? How do you know what's on your CV? Have you really done that? You know, how do you map somebody's CV to Sophia levels? How do you map your jobs in a company? You know, what skills are you missing? What level is your kind of workforce at? Quite early this morning, I had a meeting with an Australian company who have done this in Australia. I think it's quite interesting to link that to recruitment, but we need some more tools that actually verify people. Have they got that experience? How do you know? How do companies use that? And you know, maybe I did used to run a recruitment service for accountants on the very same basis. But I mean, with accountants, it's easier because you can check everyone's qualification on a public register online. But I ran a recruitment company for accountants at one point. We could potentially do that in tech, or we could quite mark certain agencies that they check proper standards, check it against severe levels. It is a possibility. You know, it's a good question.
What are the complications to have the register? Because we have our registry to make it public.
Registers.
Yeah,
we're going to make them.
We're on the way.
There's no point hiding it behind a login. Just check each other. But you know, it needs to be much more prominent. So it might not look pretty to begin with, but you know, we'll work on that. But yeah, we need a public register. And it needs to be prominently on our website.
And it would be good that then we train or educate recruiting companies to
check.
Any other questions?
I mean, I can keep asking questions all day, but I can wait until we are already outside.
Somebody is just asking, perhaps the BCS is the register for a blockchain for IT profession.
Well, you know, blockchain is part of tech. I'm not even going to begin to say I understand blockchain. I did go to a lecture on it a few years ago, and I can't say I understood it at all. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we'll start off with a basic register of qualifications and what level people are. Longer term, how do we use specialisms? How do we allow people to add their specialisms to that? We'll have to look at that. I think that's the second phase.
Thank you. There are no more questions here.
The last one, I'm just connecting a few dots. There is an initiative, very small initiative of few branches and groups that want to facilitate to members opportunities for volunteer. The idea is that branches and groups, a specialist group, if they hear about companies that are looking for volunteers to help them, for example, perhaps a company that is with low resources or a charity to improve their IT services. So the initiative is already, I mean, there are a few member groups that have been leading that. And I see that we have our own holes in the BCS. So perhaps if we identify that kind of things, perhaps we can even find some volunteers internally in the BCS to help us. That might not be to create the blockchain for the registrar, but perhaps that will be a good way to ensure that we are getting the most of our member groups.
No, I think that's a good idea, sort of volunteering register that charities could go on and look at, there's somebody in my area with the skills I'm looking for.
I mean, we have started that already. I mean, there are a few groups already involved, but this is starting at really modest pace. But yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't asked and we should be aware of?
No, I mean, I think we are going through a period of rapid change. I'm trying to change the proposition, make it more compelling for members. I am talking a lot about professionalism. I'm talking a lot about skills in the boardroom. I think all of those things kind of help support BCS and its message and where we need to get to. I think there's a lot of work to do. But I do think this is a great time in the tech industry that's moving so fast and there's so much focus on it. It's time to do these things.
You have the last question.
Well, I just have thought that, I mean, I just endorse your comments around the role of government here. It would be a dream if we could get government to recognise that just as we don't allow surgeons to operate on people unless they're members of the Royal Society of Surgeons, chartered accountants have done very well because they were written into the 1945 Companies Act, and that put them in an incredible position for half a century. But if we could have something similar from government, then that would be, I don't quite know what the shape of that is, but I'm wondering, in my mind's eye, I can see the government might be ready for that after the post office scandal, which in my opinion, I tracked down to certainly board level deficiencies when people were making decisions who weren't technically or professionally qualified to do that. And there are very serious geopolitical dimensions to AI, which they are working on. But professionalism might be something they might want to consider.
I mean, I think if you look at my LinkedIn account, I talk about this almost every week. It's rarely an article I would put out there or a speech I give that doesn't talk about this.
I have not been looking at your LinkedIn account.
Yeah,
it's my shame, but I will now.
All correct. Very interesting question again. With International Women's Day coming soon and the changes to the world paradigms that affect industry, markets, professions, and those related professionals, will BCS as a professional body proactively adopt and adapt an equity framework to enable a just transition to a professionalized IT sector?
I think for all professions, we aren't in control of the employment market. So I know we've done some research on this recently, but only 20% of the market in tech is women. So way behind most other professions. It's something I did a lot of work on with accountants. I think they're now up to, the ICAW are now up to about 32%. When we started campaigning on that, we were way in the lower 20s. The thing that moved the dial there was the work the government did on women on boards. Now accountants who's primed to sit on boards. So FTSE 100, FTSE 350 are up to sort of 40% representation now. We kind of need more of that campaigning and noise in the tech industry, but we can't determine who gets employed and the balance of what that looks like. But we can make a noise about it, and we are still making a noise about it. But yeah, tech is way behind most other professions in terms of representation of women. And it is a problem. Not easy to solve, I have to say. But yeah, we need to keep making noise about it.
Something I've been speaking about for many years. I have a degree in law, and I moved into IT. And when I was 14 and I was in secondary school in Spain as well, we were hammered. You have to do STEM because STEM is cool. STEM is amazing. Thing is, I was amazing in languages and in translating. And that's what I've been doing. I've been translating into business, into legal. So I'm the person who is doing all that. And I remember at the time, this hammering was to any kid. Then I heard this hammering for women. At the time that it wasn't gendered, I remember I was studying with somebody who was studying telecommunications engineering. And then there was a time when maybe there were just 2 women in the classroom. And then they were working with men and they were getting pregnant and they couldn't go back to work.
Yeah.
And when I was working in tech, also in here, there was no way that women could come back to work. There wasn't, maybe because there were so many men. Mm. And I've noticed that how this has been changing over the years. And when I hear this hammering of women in tech, I think they are missing the part that the workplace would have to be thinking in a different way because it's so male. It doesn't think that there's other possibilities, or even somebody like me. I'm chartered. I come from law. So I think it's the opening is not just in gender, but it's opening to, well, accountancy as well is related to. And I think it's the moment we start to open, we broaden the horizon, and also other professions, they're going to be feeling more identified with IT. It's something that you were mentioning before. Other professions are using IT. I'm preparing a talk for teachers. Teachers I was studying with when I was younger, and now they need to know about AI. They need to know about privacy because the world of the children of the future is going to be very different from our world, and they need to be ready. So opening that, we can see how everything has taken it So we can be way much more relevant the moment that we start to open our area. It's not just tech, it's everything.
Well, I would agree with that. We are currently writing the new curriculum for computing in schools, which absolutely will have AI. We have CAS and Barefoot, which help train teachers teach tech in primary and in secondary schools. And that is getting some really good results so that we can prove the impact that's making. I have to say I was quite shocked because I did lots of campaigning in the accounting profession over the lack of women in boards and in senior positions. And I even won an award around that. And we did move the dial. So I was quite shocked. I set up women in leadership courses. We had special interest groups, a bit like BCS has got. So I was quite shocked when I came into BCS to see how far behind they were nearly every other profession. And that isn't through lack of trying, I don't think. And I would have thought that tech would lend itself more easily to women working there, working hybrid, working home, working remotely, if that's what they wanted to do. So I don't think, or I've not read anything, that we've really got to the root cause of why tech is so far behind other professions. I'm not sure what's causing that. And is that worldwide or is that just in the UK? I think we just need some more evidence of why. And I get your point on STEM. Every profession is fighting for girls in STEM. I remember those campaigns. Just because STEM subjects are a really good background for an awful lot of professions. So everyone was competing for girls in STEM. So I have just not seen at this point what is the root cause of why women aren't going into STEM.
Yeah, I have some ideas. I'm gonna leave it now. Conscious of time, anybody has any other questions?
I'm sorry for my sniffling. I've got a really bad cold,
Not
so
at all.
apologies.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you for inviting
great,
me.
this talk, and please